listeners, welcome to another episode of Courage Talks. Special guest today is Professor Ashish Kaul. More than 3 decades of corporate experience, checkered history, and an extremely joyful and down-to-earth guy. Hi, Ashish.
Hi, Ethel.
Hey, thanks a lot for coming on Courage Talks. And as you know, the topic is all about courage. And the background story is my book, Against All Odds, where I talk about a lot of instances of courage that my father displayed. What does courage mean to you, Ashish?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ethel. It's we've been trying to fix this for some time. It's good that we're talking now. So courage,
Yeah.
there can be definitions and there can be opinions. I think courage for me is to do something that stands out simply because it's genuine and straightforward as a reaction. It's usually a reaction to a situation which comes from a very spontaneous place. It's not manufactured. So I think courage can manifest itself in various areas, various endeavors, various places, and it doesn't wear a uniform. It can't be trained or taught because it's spontaneous. It will happen at the spur of the moment. All the training in the world can't teach you courage. And it isn't as if one breed of people are courageous, another breed of people are not courageous. Recently, there was this man who stood up and confronted a casteist mob. And he stood up and he took a Muslim name. Now, to me, that is courage. He did it at the spur of the moment. Immediately, right then, he did it. And so I think that's what it is. It's very spontaneous, very natural. It comes in very unexpected, seemingly innocent places, actually. The ability to speak in an organization without really thinking about the consequences simply because you stand for the truth, integrity. So some people might think it's a political miscalculation, or it's a career-limiting move. But it's courage because you enjoy then the greatest respect that you possibly could. You stand for integrity. Your opinion counts much more than 1,000 other opinions which show the populist line. So that's courage to me, I think.
Any role models for courage?
Gandhi, the biggest role model of courage. I mean, in hindsight, we can all say that, but the fact that he took on the establishment in the manner he did by saying, I'm in fact harmless, I'm unarmed. It's almost like saying, but I will continue to speak, what I will say, I will say. Very difficult to do because normally when you confront somebody, especially a bully, you have to at least feign or pretend to have something behind you and to have faith in doing it in the method that he chose to do. So the biggest role model is Gandhi in a way. Role model, I won't call him a role model, but it's not as if I can even achieve what he did. So there's a word called respect and there's a word called admire.
Yeah.
The word respect is for those people. It shouldn't be bandied about very loosely. The word respect is for those people who you cannot even dream of being. Gandhi is one of them.
Yeah.
And I think you forgo the right to criticize him. The moment you conclude that you can't even dream of being him, you forgo the right to criticize him. And you look silly when you criticize him. So really, it's about that. So Gandhi is a great example. After Gandhi, you run short of examples because there are very few examples like that. Otherwise, in day-to-day actions, there are so many people. In life, I've come across people who've shown that courage. I know of a guy who jumped into a manhole to pull a child out. When everyone stood gaping, wondering what to do at that point in time. I do remember once in a Gurgaon mall very recently, there was a drunkard who tumbled down the escalator because there's one escalator which goes up and the other one goes down. He was wanting to come down, but he stepped on because he was drunk onto the escalator, which was actually coming up. And he tumbled and he fell. But that's not the story really. What happened is his head banged that escalator like crazy. And almost anyone standing around there would have concluded this man's going to die. And everyone froze and no one moved. No one moved. I was also far away. I saw it from a distance and I said, oh my God. And we were zapped. Had someone moved, that person would have been courageous in that action, to do something more. 100 complications started brimming in people's heads. We will rescue this guy. We will take him to the cops. The cops will question us. This will happen. That will happen. Why should we get involved? I think we are a nation of cowards. I'm going to say this very bluntly because we just don't get involved. You see it on the road every day. You will see people who will be from ostensibly from all kinds of professions who pretend to be brave. You see it on the road. They don't get involved. I mean, even if you're a soldier and you can't even say anything to your boss, you lack courage, right? So role models are like, I don't think there can be role models in courage because those are historical figures whom we know of. But otherwise, courage, there are plenty. in day-to-day life where you see
Hmm.
people who open their minds, people who do things which must be done. It basically comes from a lack of appreciation of the fear of consequences. You don't attribute
Hmm.
effects to, if I do this, what will happen? You don't do that. It comes from that spontaneous thought that I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Should I do it? Should I not? That thought doesn't cross your mind. You simply do it. So, and that happens all the time. It happens all the time. It doesn't get celebrated
Yeah.
because there's a fashion in what you celebrate and what you don't celebrate. There's a story that this must be celebrated, that must not be celebrated. If somebody is wearing olive green, तो उसको सेना medal दे दिया तो वो courageous हो गया. Half the time you don't know in a military operation. I can say it from some insider knowledge that you don't know who actually shot
Yeah.
those guns. When the bullets start raining, it's very difficult to define who actually killed the guy. Sometimes it is easy to define, sometimes it is not. There was
Yeah.
one, I won't take any names here, there was one famous case of one of the armed forces. There are three. There's the army, there's the navy, and
Hmm.
there's the air force. There was this notion in one of the wars. I don't want to say it too much because then the name comes out really. That particular arm
Yeah.
had not won enough gallantry awards. So for a very notional act, they were given something. So I don't think courage comes from acknowledgement. Courage is not somebody
Yeah.
gives you a medal so you're courageous. No, it doesn't come from that place at all. You know, I think
Or
that's the
even the
point.
desire to get the acknowledgement, right?
The desire,
The
वो
moment
desire
you are
को
having,
डर लगेगा तो desire चला जाएगा ना. If you feel scared, the desire will go.
yeah.
That whether you feel scared or not is there inside you, and it will be
Yeah.
evident in the spur of the moment. There can be no calculation on this.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
what it
That's
is.
true. You've gone through, a lot of people know what you are today, but, your childhood has been quite active, I would say. Cantonment living, changing places. Why don't you just take us down memory lane? Anything that you remember about your childhood, anything that stays with you?
So my childhood was very normal as a Fauji childhood can be, a Fauji brat's childhood can be, as we say. So I lived in cantonment. My father was transferred all over the place. He was an army doctor, even the army medical corps.
Mhm.
And but his postings were like that of an infantry officer, in the sense that every alternate posting was in a field area where families are not allowed. And of course,
Hmm.
families are allowed for some time. You go for a month in the summer and a month in winter, something like that, to those border areas, which are quite beautiful, interestingly.
Yeah.
So childhood was with Fauji kids and in the cantonment, very insulated, a particular type of lifestyle, some discipline. We were the kind of kids who would get off the army bus and go to school, and our shoes would be polished and our hair clipped short because the army Fauji barber would come home and bilkul kaat deta tha. She used to really chop them off. So there was a
Yeah.
certain upbringing. I don't know if it still happens. I doubt it does because many things have changed. But you didn't have
Hmm.
breakfast without having a bath. You dressed up. And if you were at home, it didn't mean you were hanging around in clothes which are old. You were dressed up. In the morning you woke up. You
Yeah.
actually wore shoes at home. So that's the environment we were brought in. And of course, it was a place which was very cosmopolitan. There was a certain way
Hmm.
in which Fauji spoke. We all had almost the same accent. We didn't come from any one religion. At least then, it wasn't like that. And you were just part of the cantonment. You were another person there. And it was a very normal kind of childhood. Nothing very exceptional. And we used to see ourselves as a little
Hmm.
different from civilians when civilian children used to tell us we were different or they thought we were different. And later we realized we were. But otherwise,
Yeah.
children are children everywhere. And cantonment life was full of sports and games and athletics and all that. And I think I went to school for sports and I went to college for politics. That's what I went for. Education, kitna hua, I don't know. How educated I am, I really don't know. But yeah, maybe I'm educated by virtue of my own reading habits. But school
Hmm.
was best for games, and college was best for politics.
Any special lasting memories you have about your father? I know, he was in the army as well. So,
Yeah, so my father was very high energy and had a great sense of humor. So he was a role model of sorts for me. And I nearly joined the Armed Forces Medical College myself. Memories of my father are all full of fun, a lot of energy, a lot of verve, a lot of enthusiasm. I mean, they used to say he was more like an infantry officer in a doctor's in the Army Medical Corps. So he was like that. What struck me the most was he was extremely likable. He had no enemies. He was very apolitical and he was very, very likable. He had a great sense of humor. So
hmm.
when and a man so alive when he dies, then you feel that something has happened. So His
Hmm.
funeral, his cremation was a big memory. I mean, he had not even completed a year after his retirement, and we were in Lucknow cantonment at that time. And in his cremation, the number of people who landed up was shocking because he had already retired in a sense. And there were many
Hmm.
people who had memories. One of the things that I remember him saying was telling me about leadership. When I had asked him a question in my adolescent wisdom at that time, that don't you think a leader should maintain a certain sense of reserve with his subordinates? You don't become very friendly and all that. So he said, if you're not liked by your people, then they will not want to be led by you. And leadership is not when you want to lead someone. Leadership is when people want to be led by you. You know. And
Hmm.
one of the things he used to say that the biggest attribute of leadership is to lead by example, but let people do what they will do best. So,
Hmm.
and I think he was into all kinds of travel, sports, photography, all these things. So
Hmm.
his whole notion of leadership was this, that, you people should like you. Those are things that I picked up from him. I'm not saying I
Hmm.
follow them. I'm good at it, but that is what I wanted to pick up to the extent I could. That's what. So those are the biggest memories, and the memories of him. Otherwise, they're small little episodes which always pointed to the fact that how you can be so loved universally by people. It is even possible. I don't think I met a man like that. You can say it's biased, but I never met somebody who had that kind of energy, that sense of humor, and the sense of liking that he generated universally among people. That was very, very, very striking to me. And I missed him a lot.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it was a big, big vacuum. And he never fell ill. And suddenly he died. He had not never even once been to hospital. I only remember through my childhood, through my all my memories of him, one common cold incident that happened. That's all. And it also struck me that when you're very happy, you don't fall sick. Also, somehow the
Yeah,
mind
that's
was
true.
trained to understand this.
Yeah.
Those were not days we spoke about autoimmune disorders, and stress was a word we actually used only in metallurgy in those days, right? And but
Hmm.
it just struck me that a man who's happy does not fall sick. It also later struck me while reading history that the biggest scoundrels on earth live the longest. So there's a paradox there.
Very true. You mentioned about being very meek in school. What was the incident that changed you from being meek and got the confidence that you have displayed today,
I've
demonstrated today?
often thought about it. The incident was very simple, but I've often thought about this. But now the answer in hindsight seems to be very simple. It is like it will be for anybody who's meek. So there are two
Hmm.
types of meek
Hmm.
people. One who are meek, who continuously get bullied because they are meek. But I believe that when you bully someone too much, he
Hmm.
does a pendulum swing. From meek, he becomes something else altogether, and he surprises you. And history is replete
थोड़ा
with that.
बॉलीवुड है लेकिन रियल है.
नहीं होता यही है अब नो इट्स हिस्टोरिकल यू लुक एट कश्मीर
Yeah.
कश्मीरीज वर कंसिडर्ड डरपोक अब तो कश्मीरी खुला घूमता है वी नो कौन छुप के बैठता है यू सी व्हाट आई मीन
Hmm. Yeah.
it is the other way around now the tables
Hmm.
turn when you bully somebody you actually do him a favor because
Yeah.
what he does and the same thing happened to me I was meek of boys plus I was mostly in a boys school all the time so in a boys school if you're meek you're doomed you will be miserable
Yeah.
the boys will thrash you Indian boys' schools are like very physical places. You come back home. Due to sports, I used to come back almost every day with bruised knees and bruised elbows and my tie torn and something or the other. But occasionally there was this notion of, getting bullied by somebody or the other. Because the boys will do that. They will bully somebody who's meek. There was one incident where I got bullied and I got hammered, cantonment mein. And I hit back and discovered I also have hands and legs. And that my hands and legs are used to sports. So they probably are not that meek or weak as my heart is.
Hmm.
And so that realization changed things. So दो चीजें होती है लाइफ में आई थिंक देयर टू थिंग्स आर देयर वन इज योर लैंग्वेज जब वो एक बार बिगड़ जाती है if your language turns into a foul and a few words come out it never reforms after that and the other thing that
Hmm.
happens is that when you discover that you are not meek you don't ever become meek after that so
Hmm.
it was one of those incidents one incident of repeated bullying which went a little far and then you kind of you fight with yourself. And I even wrote one story around it, which got published in
Yeah.
Literary Fiction magazine. and then you get out of it. It is not Bollywoodish at all. It is actually very real in the sense that you should never bully people to a point where they give it back in such a manner that you have to run for your life.
Your father was involved in the battles in the war 65, 71 as well. Any memories from the conflict? Any memories from his participation in the war? Because obviously war brings about a lot of mixed feelings. I know you were young, but sometimes those stories remain with you. Any story that's stuck with you all through these years might have turned out to be a source of inspiration?
One of the things, 𝗖𝗍𝗃, which was different between the army then and the army now, very big difference, that the families never used to get to know what's happening in the working life of their parent who was in service. Work was never discussed at home, never. And these days, it is not only discussed at home, it is touted heroically in social media. It's absurd, actually. My father would be appalled if he sees half the service officers talking on social media, including the podcast. He would have got shocked. What sort of an army is allowed this nonsense is what he would have absolutely emphatically said. Because it never happened. So we used to get to know very little. We do remember that the army wives and families, the families were generally in a state of numbness, saying, okay, Dad is, plus we were fed on this diet of patriotism. It said Dad is going to war. It was considered an act of heroism. It was a badge to be worn. Kind of silly.
Yeah.
If you grow up with that silliness, then it remains silly. But that time, there was this thing. So in my childhood, I don't remember much. I do remember we were once traveling. My father had said that, you should go towards UP and don't be, we were in Rajasthan at that time. So he says, you must leave Jodhpur and we were in Jodhpur and in some relative's place. And you must go towards UP. And those days you never went by air, you went by train only. So I do remember that train journey. He said, in the event of a war, do that because this is too close to the border. And anything can happen.
Okay.
And we were on our way and the train had stopped. There was a blackout and there were these flares in the sky. I remember that. But we didn't make anything out of it. To us, it was some Diwali fireworks as children. And parents were a little numb. Parents used to be all the time on All India radio, and my maternal grandfather or my grandfather would say, "Chalo, thoda jhoot sun lete hain." Because on both sides of the border, media used to lie. They were told to, they were given reports which were false reports, including the reports which used to come from the War Office regarding a way of. I remember once my father was completely cut off in some place, and the report that came from the War Office is absolutely safe and sound. Nothing is happening. And once when he was actually safe and sound, there was a report he's gone missing. So once my grandmother refused to believe that, he's gone missing, relatives poured in, all this happened, that he's dead, all that came out. There was some false report. And we were still numb. I can't say anything happened to us because we were children, we were still numb. It was just a drama unfolding before us. And we didn't know how to respond to it. We didn't understand it. It happened to everyone, so it was all right. It didn't really matter. But I do feel that, when a 𝗘𝗍𝗂 kid loses a parent, that it must be really traumatic. It must be quite crazy. Because that knowledge will come to you very suddenly. It will hit home very suddenly and very hard. So that's that. Yeah. And I also remember once that when he was in the 6th Mountain Division, which was a strategic reserve, posted in Bareilly, and the role of 6th Mountain Div was, in case of any skirmish or battle, that division will move to the border. General Sundarji was the chief of army staff at that time, and he was considered a master strategist. Somehow there was an escalation, and it's still not explained how it happened. Some rumors were that the general was itching for a war, wanted to become a field marshal. You'll find no filter conversations from my side. I'm going to say it the way I know it. Okay. So this was the rumor. What we heard was that general wants to become a field marshal. So he's itching for a little bit of skirmish. It could be that. But we don't know the truth because what happens there is seldom known. And this whole 6th Mountain Div, a full division, was moving to the army. I remember my father sitting in the jeep and saying, "We'll give them a bloody nose." And he almost sounded excited. And I wondered, what is this? The families went into a state of shock that what suddenly happened. And the types who are religious, I suppose they go and pray. I have no such benefit. I don't pray. So I didn't pray. So I watched those people praying who were praying. And for me, there was nothing to do. Or my sister, nothing to do. So we just watched and they went and then they came back. And then he said that, so many people lost their lives. I said, but the battle never happened. He says, when an army movement happens, en masse, people lose their lives. This was new to me. I didn't quite understand. This is when the entire army moves just from one part to the other, people lose their lives. It just, the whole thing sounded extremely harebrained to me, because by that time I was an adolescent capable of thinking. You couldn't tell me that war has a reason. I've never seen any in history. So that was the whole effect it had. It made you
You're
think.
very
I would say
active.
the conflict makes you think. It sets you thinking. It makes your creative urges come to the fore. It makes you seek more information and knowledge. It makes you marvel at how the world thinks. So it's interesting. Like today, I mean, we are sitting on a day where some 100 children have been killed by courageous men. I don't call them courageous. I call them either idiots of the first order or scoundrels in uniform.
You were fairly active in sports in school. Any incident or any learning from your school sports which stays with you?
I was very involved with sports. I loved sports and I was very involved with sports. Track and field events, which was basically not long distance so much. Later in my mountaineering days, the 10-kilometer run was our favorite run, and that was one thing we did in the course of training. But otherwise, 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters, and the related events. Related events meant high jump, long jump, triple jump, and even javelin. Because if you're a good runner, then javelin you were good at. If you had good shoulders and if you're a sprinter, you were good at javelin generally. So this, and then badminton and boxing, a few other sports, too many of them to count. But track and field events were my fodder in school, especially the 100 meters. So what I remember is that I used to love it a lot. And it all started from my Bombay schooling when I was in the second standard, third standard. There used to be this whistle which would go off in the period. And all of us used to run to the water tank. There was the water tank from where we used to drink water. There was no mineral water those days, Heta. We never fell sick. We had tap water from the garden and no one fell sick. Nothing happened. So we would dart towards that water tank and we had to come first. And there was this great thing of, and there was this joy of running. I do remember years later telling my daughter, because she took to 100 meters sprinting, I told her that, I learned certain things from sport, that the finish line is the place where you should be at your top speed. So when you breast the tape, your speed must be the maximum. And for that to happen, you can't see the finish line as the finish line. You have to recognize 20 meters ahead as the finish line. And you just have to run for your life and tell yourself at the end of time, I must fall down. That's how much I must run. The effort that I must put in should be like that.
Finish strong is what we say nowadays.
You just have to, you must ensure that you fall after that. That much you have to push yourself. So I used to tell her this because I remember, and there was this one incident. I used to generally do very well in 100 meters. And so I got used to it. Doing well in 100 meters would come easily. I think that there's a certain psychology and the mind takes over in the body when you play games and sports and you run. So the mind plays a big role, a very big role. It's not pedantic to say, the mind and body, it's not some general hocus pocus, it's absolutely true. So what happens is that, when you're really determined and you're going for it, there is this, the other people, if you keep winning, the others find it a little difficult to digest, they will win. And the moment they think they won't, they don't. And by the same token of logic, if you think you will. So I do remember this one run. This was later in college. And this guy was running just next to me and he wouldn't give up at all. And we were reaching the end and I said, I don't know, what the hell do I do? I kept powering on, but we were both exactly at the same place. To the point that when you wonder that the guy who will call out who's the winner, because in college and school you don't have the cameras and all that. Somebody takes a call, this guy won or that guy won, when it's too close. So I just remember he gave up fortunately in the end. And thanked my stars. I used to always tell my daughter, a champion runner or an athlete is somebody who does not get anxious about losing. He doesn't get anxious about losing, but he gives it the maximum he can. He is basically, his mind and his body have to be in sync. I mean, we learned this later in mountaineering a lot, because mountaineering was a field where you have to tread the fine line of caution and daring. What I mean is that you have to know when to stop and come back, because it's quite dangerous. On the other hand, you have to cross a certain known limit, because otherwise you don't have hope of climbing or reaching the summit. So it's a very fine line. If you go too far, you could be taking a huge risk. And if you don't, then you may not get to the summit. So there's this fine line. So I do remember conducting some training in climbing where I said that, the way to decide this is simple, that your body and mind have to talk to each other. So when your body starts giving up, your mind has to tell the body, listen, I'm not giving up. Why are you giving up? And when your body is giving up, it has to tell the mind, when I haven't given up, why the hell have you given up? So I said, it's tough, hai, lekin when you reach that point where this conversation can happen, you know that it can happen. That is when it works. So sports was something that I think paradoxically teaches you not to be competitive. That's what I've understood. Because when you move into mountaineering, the pace is determined by the slowest guy. You tie yourself into a rope and there are no heroes. The mountain will decide whether you stand on the summit or not. And there's mutual interdependence of a very crazy kind. Right? You've tied yourself to a guy who may not perform, may take you all down. And you just move together. And the pace is determined by the slowest guy. So genuine teamwork is not when they show these pictures of rafting, 6 people in a raft. Saying, yo baby, ho, and they go at the same time. But they're not attached to each other, genuinely speaking. Each of them is throwing the oar into the water for himself. It's synchronized, that's all. It's not teamwork. Synchronization is not teamwork. So I think what sport taught me was how to compete with yourself and to be at it, to focus, and how to not compete actually with anybody. I mean, we frown on, I think mountaineering is the only place where Hillary and Tenzing never revealed to the world. Can you imagine the curiosity in 1953, which coincided with the coronation of the Queen? Everyone wanted to know, but who set foot on the summit of Everest first? Was it Tenzing or was it Hillary? And they said, we will not tell you. They never revealed it. You cannot imagine any other sport. But then it's a different kind of field, I mean, that the slightly obscene joke goes, most other sports have one ball. So this is one of those things that you don't compete. You simply don't compete. And so competition, it also teaches you that competition definitely does not lead to achievement. It does not. It's not required. Achievement is nothing. It's a capitalist notion, Open the sector, because another Lalaji wants to get into the sector. So open the sector, competition will be good, and so this will happen and that will happen. And then what happens? When there's too much competition, the whole sector bleeds, like civil aviation. So it's actually, it bleeds. Because there can be only 4 players in a given sector, typically speaking. Leader, a challenger, a follower, a niche, something like that. Or a version of this. This is the theory. There'll be versions of it. But what sport teaches you is a few interesting things. One of them certainly is that competition is not required at all. I don't think it's the nature of competition which would make Carl Lewis win every time. It was Carl Lewis wanting to better his own timing. Because the moment you look this side, which Milkha Singh did, you know what happened. The world record gave the 4th position. Never look over your shoulder. Don't look at the other guy. Compete with yourself. In any case, it's pointless to do that. That's what I learned.
That's a very good insight about Carl Lewis and Milkha, and I think that story resonates a lot with what I believe as well. You decided to follow your father and appeared for the FMC exam, but things didn't go as per plan. Why just tell us what happened?
So I made it to FMC pretty high up on the list, merit list and all that. It was very funny because I told my father, like I told you, I went to school for sports. I didn't do too badly in academics, honestly. But I wasn't like coming first in class all the time, which is what you had to do if you had to make it to FMC. So I told my father, I'm going to appear only for FMC and not for any other medical entrance test. That time you didn't have any ET, you had different tests. So he said, very good, but why only that? I said, because I don't want to open a shop with a board over there next to one 𝗏𝗏𝗧 dukaan and do medicine there. Because that's what it was at that time, right? That somehow didn't appeal to me. I mean, just to be a doctor, not to do that sort of. And there weren't very good hospitals and all which you worked in. And to teach in a medical college, you had to be a topper. And that I was not that. I had no illusions I would never be that. So I said, to FMC, theek hai hamare liye. He said, theek to hai tumhare liye, but will you make it? So I said, no, why won't I make it? He said, because there are only 100 seats. And everybody who does biology competes for FMC. And all, but they also have the good sense to compete for All India Institute of Medical Sciences and a whole lot of other medical colleges, which you're saying you won't compete for. So how are you going to make it? I said, well, if I answer all the questions correctly, will I make it? He thought for a minute. This is fascinating. Yes, you'll make it. But when have you, then he thought, then he said, but when have you answered all the questions fully in your life? How are you going to make it? But anyway, so my preparation involved looking at the previous year's papers and trying to score on them, scoring a 60 or a 70% or something like that. then looking at the topic which I didn't get right and studying that topic, and then learning all that till I finished 1 year's papers. Then I went to the previous year's papers. Like that, I finished all the papers and I made it to FMC. So it worked. The logic was that if the question has been asked from a given section, that section must be important. So I should learn that section. I, in any case, can't read all of this. So let me focus on this. So I did that. I made it. And then, despite being a sportsman, I had a bilateral cervical rib, which that year became a cause of rejection in the Armed Forces Medical College.
Oh man.
So that particular year, because there were these students who had bilateral cervical rib, when they wanted to break the bond, you have to sign a bond when you are in the FMC, Armed Forces Medical College. You sign a bond because they spend on you, and they said, if you violate the bond, you have to pay this amount of money. So many people would try to look for a way of getting out and not joining the army and breaking the bond. And what they would do is, the guys who had bilateral cervical, which are quite a few, by the way, it's almost 15% of the population has bilateral cervical. So in their wisdom, the army in its wisdom does some very interesting things. So they decided, so 𝗘𝗽𝗃𝗃, make it a cause of rejection so that you don't have to suffer these clowns at all. So I was in that group. My father was an army doctor and he was there with me in FMC during that time. He refused to speak to anybody. He could have probably influenced some people. And because there's an appeal medical board, they would have made me raise my hand and said, no, the subclavian is kind of not so superficial. The subclavian arteries and brachial plexus, not much of a problem. So let's pass him. But he refused to speak. And I said, well, good. If you refuse to speak, you refuse to speak. So FMC went out. And I was now late for admissions. And I ended up in Lucknow University and I ended up doing things which turn you slowly into a student leader.
So let's hear about the gundagardi that you did in Lucknow, which you call as politics.
So, gundagardi, I can't, what if my students listen to this podcast? I don't want to inspire anyone in this area. But what I want to say is that...
Don't worry, your contact details will be kept completely confidential.
No, it's not about my contact details, my students looking at it. But anyway, I'll tell you what happens. In a place like Lucknow, if a cantonment boy goes to Lucknow University, he will generally find it very difficult in that environment of that time, in a hostel. But I somehow have this tendency of being comfortable in any environment. Like I mentioned to you, standing up to bullying is something I learned to an extreme. And so the first thing that they will try and do over there is to try and bully. Sometimes some people get targeted. So the same incident repeated itself years later, and there is student politics is rampant, there is crime, there's a whole lot of things in the university. And the elections had been banned. Student elections had been banned for some time. They were opening, sessions were delayed, all kinds of things were happening. So I ended up standing up to people, as a result getting embroiled in it. That's what honestly happened. And this does happen. It is known to happen. And the act of courage was not there. The act of courage was to get out of it later when I went in for my MBA, to dump it all after having gone so far into it. That was probably an act of courage because that requires you to do some certain things. It was very interesting though. It makes you grow up. One thing it tells you, if you thought politics is filthy and dirty, which everybody thinks it is, then it is an understatement of a lifetime because it is more filthy and dirty than you can even imagine. You get to see it there. You get to experience and see certain things which will shock you as to what it is all about and how far it can go. It's not even I don't think it's necessarily about the gains or the spoils from all the crime that happens in politics. It's simply because it attracts a certain type of person and it creates a certain environment or a culture which is actually unfit to rule anyone. So this understanding of politics from the trenches in that sense was something I learned. Having said that, I was student leader, I did not contest the elections, though it was expected and logically it seemed to go in that direction. But this is what it teaches you. You get to see things very deeply and there's a different dimension of courage. You're facing up to people who are actually the worst you can imagine, who you would not normally face up to. You also get to see the limits of other people's courage, the act that they put up. 56 inches is the least of them. Those are easier ones to digest. You will be surprised that a person all powerful will think 100 times when he does something. So you are able to actually call somebody's bluff. You are able to see through people a little bit more because you've seen the worst there was to see to that extent.
And then you went to Himalayan Mountaineering Institute. What did mountaineering teach you which staying on the ground would not have ever?
There's this book by 𝗍𝗍, it's called Mount Analog. I think this question that you asked is the biggest. There is more literature on this aspect of why people climb than there is on the actual act of mountaineering. This is something that fascinates everybody. Why do you do it? I mean, it's not even covered in insurance. I mean, if you die, your family is going to get no money because the insurance company says, you must be mad. If I'm going to give you insurance for climbing a mountain, that's a very bad business case because you're doing something manic.
Yeah.
Why do you do it? So there is this book in which he writes one paragraph, which is very lasting. Incidentally, the story is that 𝗍𝗍 started writing this book. He reached some 55 pages. And after that, he stood up to answer a doorbell. Mysteriously, he died. So his book was not even complete. And some people found it, and this unpublished book is now available. This incomplete book is available now, published. I'd sold record copies. And he writes about Mount Analog, mythical mountain. There's one paragraph, I remember it vividly. It says, you cannot stay on the mountain forever. So why climb? Only this. What is above knows what is below. What is below does not know what is above. One climbs, one
Wow.
sees. One
Yeah.
descends, one sees no more, but one has seen. There is an art of living below by the memory of what one saw higher. So I think mountaineering gives you a certain calm type of confidence. It makes you a little humble about yourself. It makes you feel small. It makes you value people who are of all kinds, including socioeconomically not as privileged as you. And it teaches you courage of a very crazy kind. It's a voluntary act of manic proportions, of preposterous proportions. It teaches you those things. It tests your limits, your physical and mental limits, like nothing else can. So it really does that. And so it teaches you many, many things, and you marvel on the materialist things start seeming very puny to you. They seem very small to you because everything which you accorded too much importance to earlier seems to be play a very insignificant part of your real life. So it's an experience to be had. And I do believe anyone who's fit must try it, at least trekking to 𝗍𝗏, because I think also paradise is arranged vertically on the earth. People go horizontally everywhere to seek it from one country to the other. But it's only upwards of 3,000 meters that Jannat exists. It really is like that.
Yeah.
So when the tree line vanishes, and then the meadows come, and after that the moraines and the glaciers come, and then the huge mountains come. That is,
as they say, the green, the brown, the whites, right?
Yeah. The green and very crazy, very huge, very big. You can't imagine the scale till you're there. You can't imagine how puny you are till you're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and you shock yourself. Oh, I got here. One of the tricks we do in mountaineering training is also to tell the guy when he's getting really frustrated, boss, I still have so much to go. He turn around, face the fall, and see how far you've come. He says, oh, I've come so far. Then suddenly he feels charged again. You know, he wants to move on. So that's an important thing. So it teaches you a lot. I think, see, everything teaches you, but there's a certain flavor that mountaineering teaches you, which is very experiential. It's very difficult to explain. And I'm not talking spirituality here. That doesn't exist in my book at all.
Your corporate career started with a stint with the Bharti Group, and I think you were among the youngest.
I started with advertising. I started with advertising. I was at FCB, then I was Lowe Lintas. Bharti Group was later. After Eicher, where I was for some 7 years, I joined Airtel long distance division, which started the STD and ICT services. And this was a startup, but a startup which was really well funded, which putting a lot of capex for the ground.
Startup of mammoth proportions, as they say.
Mammoth proportions. Yeah, it was actually wiring up the whole country, to get the long distance call going, which was earlier a monopoly of BSNL, MTNL in Delhi and Bombay, and BSNL. And it was hugely successful. So I became the strategy head there after 3 months. There was this long distance tariff strategy which brought it, which in fact it was 26 January 2001 to be precise, when India started taking to the mobile phone. It wasn't some graph of 45 degrees where people gradually adopted the mobile phone and it picked up. That is not true.
Yeah.
Suddenly on 26 January, people migrated. It was called the migration strategy, or cell-to-cell pricing, migration strategy. These were the names for it. When people left the landline and started using the mobile phone, because it made more sense to do that in every respect, including basically driven by the price, which was prohibitive till then. And we ended up with EBITDA positive in the first month, net profits in the 7th month, and it was a 900 crore business at the end of the year. And this is 2000 months. It became very big. So that is, I joined Bharti after kind of nearly 10 years almost. Some 3.5 years in advertising and some 7 years in Eicher. After that, I joined Bharti. I was a strategy head. Then I led a pretty busy life that time. It was a very hectic, very enjoyable, very challenging. Because Bharti Airtel is a very dynamic company. It was very, very dynamic. It was a joy to work there. It was full of action. And that's what that stint was.
Any incidents from your corporate life which stayed with you? Any role or any assignment that really took a lot of courage or a lot of energy, something that really opened a new perspective for you?
So, Hetal, sometimes, you're just fortunate that you end up in places where something major is happening. When I started in advertising, there was a brand called LML
At the right
Vespa.
place at the right time.
There was a brand called LML Vespa, which was fighting Bajaj. And that was a turnaround case. I can't say it was to do with only me. There was Ravikant, who was later in Tata Motors. He was our client. There was Anil Kapoor, who was the chief of, not this Anil Kapoor, not the one we know in films, but the famous Anil Kapoor of advertising, who was the chief of FCB, Ulka that time, FCB advertising. And there was Santosh Desai, who I later worked with in McCann also, again, as a strategic planning director, and he was the president. And Santosh was the group manager there, and he was the planning head of sorts. So it was a very interesting team, and something very different was done to bring LML out of the wood, take it out of being a BIFR case with 37 crores of accumulated losses, and make it a case study of sorts. And Ravikant became marketing person of the year. I was a greenhorn with apple cheeks who had just come into the system, so it was great learning for me. We all played a little role of some kind. And then in FCB in Lintas, there was Officer's Choice, a brand that I handled, which became the fastest growing in the history of IMFL. Officer's Choice in liquor. So that was interesting. But again, we did different things. I think it always was doing the obvious but different things. Usually an insight is very obvious in hindsight. It is obvious. Any good consumer insight or any insight which leads to a strategy is actually obvious, but only in hindsight. At the time it is happening, it is very different. It's like the truth, no? The truth is always rare. The truth is the act of courage, right? You're talking about courage talks. When you're truthful, it is courage. You're simply truthful. It's the undiluted truth. It's the unfashionable truth. And that's equal to courage, strangely. In the same way, so there was this Officer's Choice was a brand like that. The Bharti experience of the pricing strategy on sell to sell, which actually genuinely came from my table, for which I can take a lot of credit, was an experience that left a very lasting impression in my mind. And it was logical to the point of being foolproof, but it suffered from the suspicion that I'm saying all this, but will the system buy it? Because usually you can come out with a great idea, and the system somehow is geared to not doing it. It happens quite often with people. So there are many people who are brilliant, but their work does not see light of day because the others were not in agreement, or it did not see sanction. It did not happen. It wasn't approved. So to that extent, Sunny Mittal saw the vision of it, and it got implemented. There's a lot of learning in all of these cases, right? And through the career, it has been like that. There have been cases and situations, because it's been a long career. In 35 years, somewhere, I've ended up in industries where their moment of truth has arrived. They are the springboard. So in automobiles and two-wheelers, something won't turn around, I'm somehow there. It's a matter of fortune. It's just luck that you're there in some places when things are geared to take off, in a sense. So there's a lot of corporate learning. Having said that, I think I've learned more from outside, which helps corporates, than from corporates, which will help life. I'm not a great believer in corporates teaching you much. I'll be very blunt and honest over here. Yeah, they teach you enough to make you a better academician. Because an academician without any corporate experience is limited a lot. It's greatly limited, especially in areas like management and marketing, where theory and practice are both conjoined. But outside of that, does corporate teach you anything in life? Maybe it teaches a lot of things you should not do. Don't list, it manufactures beautifully. A sports can teach you a lot about how to do better in corporates. Other fields and endeavors which can teach you a lot. But from your corporate life, how much you learn to be a better citizen, I don't think corporates are designed to do that.
I think my perspective there is, while corporates might not teach, but great leaders might, right?
Yeah,
So how
yeah.
you leaders or managers behaved, you can definitely apply that in your personal life, and set that example to your children, to your students, and talk about them as well. That could be there. But yeah, I agree
That
with you. I
is
think
true. That's true. Absolutely. Absolutely. Great leaders. And but I must say this leadership, there are three types of leadership. One leadership is positional. The guy has been given that position. That positional leadership is
yeah,
no use. You learn nothing from that. So it's not as if
true.
every MD can teach you something. We are very fond of
Yeah, just
asking
because I
every
got
MD, what message do you have
but
for the world?
just because I got $1 million of budget to spend and I do what I can with that $1 million does not make me a great guy.
Yeah, it's that original example of my father saying that the leader is the guy who people want to be led by, not the guy who wants to lead people. Now, positional leadership in corporate life is you have appointed someone. Just because you
Yeah.
appointed someone, I'm going to learn anything from him. No, I'm not going. Of course, you have to point. Sometimes, coincidentally, you appointed somebody who's really good. But
Hmm.
great leaders in corporate life, there are very few examples, genuinely speaking. Every
Yeah.
managing director is not a great leader. Every CEO is not a great leader. Every vice president is certainly not a great leader.
Yeah.
In the entire American plethora of leaders, we could think of a few examples like a Jack Welch, and he also came with a
Yeah.
chink in the armor, being sometimes very dominating. So there were
Yeah.
all kinds of leaders, or Steve Jobs, for example. Of course, that's my favorite example. There were many things right, there were few things wrong, which will always happen with all of us. But
Yeah.
that's an example of somebody who could balance who leadership, then so many other skills, the ability to use both the left and right brain, to have that engineering mind, but have a marketing brain. Very tough. Now, that's a
Yeah.
man you would learn from, You can't learn from every other corporate fellow on the road, right? Or in the
Yeah.
cabin. So that's what
That's
it is.
true.
But I think, like I said, Sunil Mittal, there were qualities in him that we learned. Anil Kapoor, who was in FCB, I learned. There were many people I worked with from whom I learned. There were many from whom I learned what all not to do. I would observe them quietly and said, boss, how can you do this? I hope I never do this. There were those also.
We all had our own story during COVID-19. You had a pretty tough one.
Yeah,
You
I
had
had a
an
very.
extended stint in the ICU. What do you remember still from the tough time that you went through, and what were the thoughts going on? Just take us
So
back
COVID
down there.
caught me by surprise in many ways. And I first, one thing was that I assumed because I'm a mountaineer, I'm into sports, I'm very fit, very, very fit. I thought it won't affect me quite that much. And I took it a little casually. I mean, I would take all the precautions, but I would say, nahi, theek ho jayega. So I delayed. And I went to the hospital little too late, as the doctor said. And I ended up in the ICU for a very, very long stint. My doctor tells me it was probably the longest in Bombay in a COVID ICU without lapsing into coma or dying. And that's more than
Roughly how long
21
was
days.
that?
It was more than 21 days. And it was very long. And I do remember that, at one stage when I was coughing a lot of blood out. When I kind of moved to hospital, I was already coughing blood. When I reached there, I started coughing little bowls of blood, actually. And one day, I mean, not one day, in the next few hours, they kind of wheeled me through this elevator on a stretcher with those wheels. And the last thing I remember is the sound of the door shutting and a little jerk. And then I remember waking up with all the contraction and realizing, oh shit, I'm alive. So that was it was almost like I'd gone and come back. I don't know what happened, but this is what it was. And then I started tiding over it, and I was in ICU. It was very painful because there were three beds opposite mine, one bed adjacent to me, and those beds got empty. In this long stint I was there, they got emptied. Twice people died and went, and people came. There was one lady in coma who died in the end in the last bed on the corner. And it was very traumatic. It was very traumatic to be witness to that. I do remember going in this contraption, which was not even an ambulance, supposedly an ambulance from a good hospital in Bombay. What was the contraption, which is actually meant for, when you carry these bricks and all that, and sariyas, us type ki gadi thi, in which I went to hospital. And no one was supposed to go with you. In fact, those were days, if you remember, in the Delta variant was there, they said even your dead body no one should touch. So it was almost as if you were going to the crematorium via the hospital. It felt that way. That was the feeling with which you went. But you had no choice, you went. So it was crazy. I have this immense gratitude and respect for the medical profession. I always used to have that, and I don't believe in that criticism of, oh, they are making money, everybody's making money and all that. But I think if there's one profession which deserves the money it makes, it's the medical profession. Not many of others deserve so much. But the point is that in that whole, the way the paramedical staff were dedicated, they wouldn't even sit down for a minute. They were always in the move. The immense risk that they were taking. We talk about courage. I think they are far more courageous than all these fellows who move around with guns. Far more courage. They could have refused duty. They could have shammed. No. On the other hand, enthusiastically they took to it. It was quite shocking. It's the culture of the medical profession, I think, to be there to, look after people. And they were there all the while. I do remember there would be some sister, and they would be all in PPEs, so you really could see their faces also really well. And she would come to me and say, "Sir, मेरी ड्यूटी खत्म हुई है आज, मैं एक दिन बाद आऊंगी, आपसे दोबारा मिलूंगी." It was almost like telling me, "Don't go away." But it's later occurred to me that she could have gone away, They were prone to infection more than anyone else. And they were seeing more death than the patients were seeing. Forget about the people who were outside the hospital. So COVID was a very numbing experience. For 3 months, I was isolated in a room for fear of reinfection at home only after getting discharged. And another 3 months, there were some other restrictions. So it was quite an experience. It was quite crazy, and it led to not being able to sleep. Till date, my sleep is not exactly the way it used to be. And then there were some after effects of that happened. I damaged my knee, then I could run for some time. I still can't fully run. I'll start again. The eyesight got immediately affected. So it was crazy. And then my wife and my daughter at home had also COVID at that time, which was quite, very crazy. My daughter actually was small that time, and she was asking for numbers. What if she becomes orphaned? So I can't describe how it was. And then to sit in my understanding of an ICU, I've never been admitted to hospital before COVID. I was always very healthy like my father. Although I would fall sick much more than him. He had only one common cold that I can recall. But I remember that my understanding of the hospital was an ICU is a place where no one is allowed. And in a hospital there are certain restrictions. But now in the days of the mobile phone, your mobile is with you in the ICU. And on your mobile, you're seeing news of people dying on the status post. And there are lots of people who are calling you out of sheer concern when you're not even in a position to talk and speak at that time because the throat gets affected very, very badly. So it was an absolutely crazy experience. I think it changed the world in many ways. The world is now reconciled to a lot of hell breaking open without panicking. One of the things that has happened that including corporate loyalties have shifted. Employees have seen that corporates can dump them anytime. They're returning the compliment. People want to enjoy their life. Work-life balance has come in. Suddenly, remote working and working from home has become okay. All these COVID changed many things. Also, COVID did me a big favor. I started writing because I had this great fear. Shit, my stories have not been published so far. I'm going to die unpublished. And I started writing with a vengeance when I came out, and I had so many publishing credits after that, and a lot of awards in creative writing, in short story writing. Although there were many more rejections. This was like the tip. The elections and the wins were like the tip of the iceberg. 𝗖𝗎 was full of rejections. But it made me very determined that I have to get this out and all that. So it was good in a way. It was terrible in many ways. That's what it was.
So how did your writing journey start? What would you write about? Was it more of a venting? Was it more of trying to have a dialogue with your readers? And did it end up in a lot of fights?
No, so my writing was actually ages ago in the ninth standard. I was in a school called Christchurch, Jabalpur. My father was posted in Jabalpur, and there was this teacher called BBC. And I remember I told you about my meek days. One of the elements of my meek days, my timid days, was that I used to be the shy kid who could not handle people and crowds. The only time I came into my own was on the sports field, on sports days. That's what it was. Baki bolti band. This is what I was. So in the ninth standard, this teacher decided that I have no business to be like that. And he made me participate in a debate. And I found my tongue. And it was a great discovery to the point that my wife and her daughter says, "Ki bhai, thodi saans to le lo, bolne ke beech." The tongue has gone so far. And It so happened that I was asked to write an essay. I wrote the essay and it really fascinated the school. There's an episode there. And then I felt, oh, I think I can write. When I read Salman Rushdie's Midnight's Children, I was amazed that a book can go so far. You know, it can affect you so deeply. So I started writing a lot. But my corporate life was very busy. I used to write part-time. I was working on a novel. So in the morning, I would go for a run, then write a little bit, then go to office. Sometimes I would write, sometimes I wouldn't. So it was going on and on. Till one day when I decided to actually start writing properly. And I realized that if I have to publish, I was not so keen on getting published in India because that time even more so, and even now, I think it is there that if you're published only in India, your chances of being published abroad are a little remote because they will say the quality may not be that up to the mark. So I said, okay, as a marketing person, I said, let me resist the temptation of first being published here. Let me try and get published abroad. So they have a process. When you write a query letter with which you send your sample work, the query letter has 3 parts, and the third part is the author's bio. So it's like the hook, the book, and the cook. So the hook is your hook of the book, and the book is your synopsis without the ending revealed, and the cook is you as the writer. And I just realized that the cook part of it was damn weak because I had no writing credentials. I wasn't published. So I said, this is the first thing I have to correct. And so I started writing short stories. That's the way you correct it. And like I told you, it really came to the fore. Before COVID also, I published a little bit, but it came to the fore after COVID because I got after it like crazy. Then last year, I won the Austin Clarke Prize for Excellence in Literary Fiction. That was a big high. So I do believe that if you keep at it and you keep at it, you keep at it and you really enjoy it, you will get somewhere. So that happened to the writing journey. I also wrote political satire. And my political satire is scathing, and I like writing humor. So they are like takedowns of sort, which are good fun to read. Good fun for those who want to laugh at someone, not good fun for those who get laughed at. So, and for me, it is an ideological warfare every time with my pen. And so there have been cases. There was one, in fact, there was this case of me writing a blog post. I won't name the writer. There is this best-selling Indian writer in English. I won't take his name. And he happened to write something about Kashmir in one of his columns, which was very patronizing, insulting, and more than that, completely ignorant and stupid. And I decided to write a blog post, which was an open letter to him. And I posted it. And then through Twitter, it went viral. And I was trending that day in India because it was funny. It was angry. It was funny. It was very Kashmiri. It was not Kashmiri Pandit or Kashmiri Muslim. It was Kashmiri. So that went viral. I followed it up with 2 more letters, one to a far-right organization, the head of a far-right organization, one to an army chap who did something really disgusting in Kashmir, and one to one right-wing idol of Canada-based. All these open letters went viral. They created controversy. They even led to some threats by certain quarters. But that served to even to make me resolve that I'm going to write more. That's all they achieved. So writing used to be, so political satire was generally the one that would stir the hornet's nest a little bit. And literary fiction and historical fiction, because I write political fiction, literary fiction, a lot of it is to now do with Kashmir. So that's what it is. There's a short story collection. I mean, just 2 days ago, it was longlisted in the CNR Press Prize. So I'm at work on that. I need to complete 2 more stories. So this writing is a very interesting, passionate journey. And it goes on and on.
So does your writing invariably reflect your first-hand knowledge of things around you? Is it partially imagination? What's been the source of inspiration? Anyone in your family, any of your parents who are into writing?
So you know, it's like historical fiction. You always have a source. When you write historical fiction or you write political fiction, the story is fictional, but it is around something that is real. It's not unreal. So the source is always a deep understanding of history and the place. I have this vantage view of being, for example, when I talk about Kashmir, I have this rare profile of having seen Kashmir from both sides, the Kashmir conflict from both sides. As a Kashmiri who adores Kashmir and is unhappy about the way things are there, and as the son of an army officer, seen Kashmir from the other side, with a lot of Fauji friends. So I can see both sides. There are 2 distinct sides of it. The 2 are unrelated to each other. They're in fact opposite sides, but I can see it from both sides. So there is personal knowledge, there is research, there is conversation, there's reading, all of that. So it is always, it is personal experiences, and I think the best of writing comes when you personally experience something. It's experiential when you have first-hand information. If you see the books of the best of writers, they'll have a slew of books that they've written. But the one that they've written which has won them acclaim or has been appreciated the most is almost invariably that one which is actually semi-autobiographical, or it comes from some place which is personal.
Yeah.
So that's what it is all about, Like these days, I just concluded a short story writing workshop recently where I was talking about exactly these things. It starts with the source of your story. What is the source of your story? Where do you want to set it? I start with the setting, in fact. This is where the story is set, and what is it about? It's some grain of thought which comes from your own personal experiences. So that's really what it is. So it has to be that. It can't be completely, of course, there is this set on a true story and the person fictionalizes what he conveniently wants to and quotes history where he wants to. This is happening a lot in Indian cinema as well. But that is not an honest story of quality. It may be a bestseller. Bestsellers and quality are two separate things.
Very true. What's coming up next for you? Anything that you're really looking forward to in the next few years?
No, I mean, more of the same. That's it. More of the same. Nothing in particular.
If you get an invite to a TED Talk tomorrow and you have to cite the topic that you would like to talk about, what would it be?
There can be a lot of topics given my experiences, but recently I've been thinking of a TED Talk which is about storytelling. Storytelling and how the short story is the essence of storytelling. In other words, I really want to explain that there are a lot of people who are storytellers. Everyone is a storyteller, which is true also at one level. But if you can't write a short story, then you aren't really doing storytelling. You know what I mean? There are certain characteristics of short story which define storytelling. So I would probably do a TED Talk on that. I could do a TED Talk on the state of, it could be an opinion on the state of affairs. I just did a post on LinkedIn recently, today, on what's happened in Iran and other things. What's the matter with the world, today? Certainly, something is certainly the matter. What's the matter with the world today? क्या मामला है? क्यों हो रहा है? ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है? एकदम से क्या हो गया?
3 books top of the mind which have influenced you the most.
Very difficult to say 3 books which have. Midnight's Children I can never keep out of my list. Midnight's Children by Rushdie, I doubt there's a better book in contemporary literature. At many levels. 100 Years of Solitude is another one of them. Discovery of India, Nehru's Discovery of India. I think these are the 3. Because these are 3 books. There are many. I read very, very voraciously. But there are many, many books. I think these 3 books, I would say that my reading would be seriously limited if I had not read these 3 books.
Okay, let me ask a different question. A book which is very hatke, not very popular, yet it influenced you a lot.
Not very popular. Actually, the books which have influenced me more are the not very popular types only. The popular ones that I really don't feel like reading, honestly speaking, especially the how-to types, self-help and how-to and all that. Not very popular in current literature would be Virginia Woolf, James Joyce, these kind of writers, the great Russians, Chekhov, Gorky, Dostoevsky, those. But I think they're popular among a certain readership. And otherwise, in among contemporary readers, probably they don't even know of them. So that to that extent, it's likely.
It's been a good conversation, but the best part is towards the end. What is the question you have for me?
The question I have for you is, what is the question I have for you? Actually, I don't have any particular question that I've thought of for you at the moment, except that I think you're doing this is a very good thing that you do. What you're doing, talking about moving into people's lives through courage and the manner in which you go about it. You're doing a very good job of this. And I do think you should talk to people more and more the way you're doing, get them and actually look for some of those people who have shown courage without being commended officially. There are so many of them today. The need of the hour, how you align to that need is what you would look at. The need of the hour is to pull out those stories of people who are standing up and facing the bullies. कि तुम हमको जेल में बंद, I'm not talking of Kejriwal here for heaven's sake, but I'm just saying, people were saying, do
Yeah.
what you want. I'm not going to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally, if you could get Sonam Wangchuk into your podcast, it'd be absolutely a killer.
Thanks a lot, Ashish. It's been pleasure talking, and continue the great work you're doing. Continue creating Tempest on LinkedIn as you love doing.
Controversies.
And I would say, and stay safe, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Hitesh,
Thanks,
it was a
man.
good conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.